Welcome, Cloud Gamers, and today I want to talk about some of these negative articles and narratives that always seem to find their way into the stratosphere when it comes to Google. Lately, Google has been doing an awesome job when it comes to Stadia. Right when so many positive things are moving in the right direction, it's almost right on cue that something has to come and try and tear that down. So in this video, let's talk about this new narrative that developers and publishers don't want to work with Stadia, and see if we can dissect some of this thought process and figure out if there's any validation to these reports. So let's dive into this video. But before I go further, please smash the like button and sub to the channel for more cloud gaming and Stadia coverage. So a new report has come out from Business Insider, and I will have a link down below, that Google can't attract publishers or developers, or more specifically indie developers and publishers. One quote says, "We were approached by the Stadia team. Usually with that kind of thing, they lead with some kind of offer that would give you an incentive to go with them. But the incentive was kind of non-existent. That's the short of it." And then a publishing executive goes on to say, "It's that there isn't enough money there. It's so low that it wasn't even part of the conversation." So the underlining echo here is that Google isn't offering enough incentive to these indie developers and publishers to be on their platform, whether that is monetarily or otherwise. And I have to say, I think that's BS. First, at some point in this article, it claims that there is only 4 indie games launched on this platform, and while there are only 30 games as of the date of this video and when this article launched, that is false. There is 6 games. We're counting the new SteamWorld titles. But if we actually take a look at the indie games currently on Stadia, we have 2 timed exclusives currently on the platform being Spitlings and Guilt. And then we have the non-exclusives being Kind and Thumper, as well as the SteamWorld titles. Now with Guilt and Spitlings, we don't know the deals they received, but obviously it was enough incentive to develop for Stadia first and eventually release on other platforms. Another quote from this article goes on to say, "When we're looking at these types of deals, we're looking at it, is this enough money where we have the resources to make what we want, or is this an exclusivity deal that gives us the security? There are platforms you want to be on because they have the audience and you want to reach that audience. That's what Steam is, that's what Nintendo Switch is. They have big groups on their platforms, and you want to be with those groups so they can play your games." Okay, so once again, a developer goes on to say that there isn't enough money, and can an exclusivity deal give us enough security? But to counter this point, we got word back in mid-January that in just the first half of the year alone, Google Stadia is going to have 10 exclusives coming to this platform. 10 exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I'm pretty sure all 10 of those are timed exclusives, and it's another safe bet to say the majority of those titles are going to be indie games by indie publishers. We already know some of those games. Stacks on Stacks, Get Pack, Lost Words Beyond the Page. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat myself one last time. 10 exclusives in just the first half. We don't even know what's happening in the second half of the year. Maybe Google is blowing its indie games wad in the first half and has nothing for the second half, but either way, 10 timed exclusives, which are mostly going to be indie games, completely destroys this narrative that Google is offering nothing. What incentive would an indie developer have to release a game on Stadia as an exclusive time title without a bit of security in the cash department? The platform is still small, and in this own article, there is a quote that says from a developer that being on Steam or the Nintendo Switch is the preferred place to be. And yes, I agree with that because indie games are thriving on those too. But this narrative now that will be floated by every publication, and I'm sure YouTube are here soon, that Google is offering nothing, has to be a load of garbage. Not only that, but we are starting to even see just regular indie games make its way to the platform that have already been out, like Superhot, the SteamWorld games. And as a guy who's covered indie games almost exclusively for the last year and a half, I've been really impressed with the games that Stadia has been acquiring, and I have welcomed the fact that, frankly, just on what I've seen so far, Google gets that indie games are important, and this will be a focus for them in the future. If you guys think that Nintendo Switch doesn't attribute some of their success of that platform to indie games, you'd be foolish. I mean, they even dedicate Indie Connects to their showcase on a quarterly basis. Google, from all accounts that I've seen, gets that. From these timed exclusives to the games that have been announced so far and the ones on the platform currently, I literally, as a huge indie game advocate, have no worry about this type of information from these anonymous developers and executive publishers. And the last thing they mention here is a fear of Google shutting Stadia down and killing the service. This was brought up by every person they spoke to in this article. And frankly, as this horse has been beaten to death over and over by now, if you still think that, I don't know what to tell you. All the signs that Google is taking Stadia extremely serious are there. And frankly, I don't feel like repeating all of it. The new development studios and just the sheer investment and outlook that has been and will be poured into Stadia leaves me with zero worry personally. And I would implore these developers and publishers to do a little research and reach out to fellow developers who are and have been developing for Stadia and get those fears quashed. While we can never say never with anything in life, this would be one of my last worries about developing on this platform if I were a developer. With that said, I don't doubt that these quotes are legitimate. I don't. I'm sure there is some indie developers and publishers who were approached for games and they just didn't like the deal. They didn't like what was being offered and decided not to bother. Maybe the games themselves weren't that great, so the offer was low. But Google doing its due diligence to get a feeler for a particular game makes sense, as you wouldn't be doing your job trying to bring as many games as you can if you don't do that. Or maybe the game was super huge, like the example they used in this article, being Untitled Goose, and for such a big indie game, maybe the offer was too low and it just didn't make sense for both sides. Honestly, I have no clue. And frankly, I don't care. But now we get to hear this narrative that Google has nothing to offer, that they lowball indie developers and publishers, when all we have to do is just look at what's happening this year with Stadia and see that this is a bunch of malarkey. Maybe we can get a comment here from the developers at Tequila Works or CodeSyncs, the publishers for Get Packed, and I bet they'll tell you something vague but substantial and say, nah, we've been more than compensated. And frankly, we have no issues and look forward to the future of this platform. Because that's the quotes that I've seen the past 6 months from indie developers developing on Stadia. That the future of this platform looks bright. And even despite the security they will receive for being on Stadia first, they believe in this platform. Otherwise, they wouldn't even bother developing here. But to be really frank with all of you listening, this article, in my opinion, is trying to paint Google and Stadia in a certain way. The fact there is so many indie developers, you can throw a needle in any direction and hit one right in the eye. So if you get sound bites from a few dudes out of God knows how many thousands and thousands of indie publishers and developers, you can probably paint Stadia and its outlook in any way you want. And ultimately, that's my take on this article. So let me know down in the comments your guys' thoughts on all this. I'm sure you guys have your opinions. I'm pretty sure some of you will tell me that I'm being delusional and a fanboy. So let me hear those thoughts from that crowd as well. Please hit that like button and hit that notification bell to be aware of when my videos go live, and sub to the channel for more cloud gaming and Stadia news. And I'll catch you guys in the cloud.